Because the culture they bring to this country.
Okay, so right. So let me explain. Right. So here's the deal. In the presence of a welfare state, which exists in '65, you have to pick and choose which immigrants you bring in. You do. I mean, otherwise everybody just comes in.
I agree.
Okay, if you agree, then what is your standard for bringing in immigrants? Clearly, it's not taking federal benefits or state benefits. Clearly, it's not driving with our culture. You don't want any restrictions on immigrants. Should we get 6 billion people coming over here? Where do you draw the line?
Okay, well, I do want restrictions on immigrants. I want to, but I want to have a line and a process and a system.
Can you explain?
Explain
what?
You just
I'll tell you where I'll draw the line.
Explain why you're drawing the line around culture, please.
Because culture makes a difference to a country.
So tell me, who are the American enough cultures to come in?
Anybody, any individual. And devotees of any culture who believe in individual freedom, who believe that they actually have to take it, that they have to believe in the notion of private property and constitutional limited government. That's what we've gotten into countries about.
Who the fuck have you ever met in this entire green, beautiful world who does not believe in individual liberty?
Are you kidding me?
Well,
this is okay. This is legitimately fully delusional. 99%. By Gallup polls, 99%. I can't say polls.
Go ahead.
By Gallup polls, 99% of the population of Afghanistan believes in the implementation of Sharia law. That's not an individual freedom.
Don't do that. I would have fact checked you on that and said you are missing. Oh no, guys, like this is like I know we have a fact-free election. I understand, but you can't repeat lies enough and hope they become facts. It's not true. You're misrepresenting Sharia law, and you are using Sharia law to suggest that everyone who believes in Sharia law believes in extremism. Gallup, the same organization, the same. Guys, don't get out in the world.
Sally,
Gallup said 7% of actual. Whatever.
I recommend that if you believe that, you try to go to a Sharia law-believing Muslim and ask them to cater your lesbian wedding.
I have.
Robert Putnam, and what he said is the diversity of values actually results, typically, in more fragmented communities, more protest marches. The diversity is richness routine, only applies where you have a common goal in mind as far as what the rules of society, what freedom looks like. And diversity of values that encompasses actual values that are evil is not a worthwhile diversity. So not all diversity is worthwhile diversity. And everybody agrees with this, right? I mean, if you have a room of 3, that doesn't mean that you have to shut people up. You know, I think that the best answer to bad speech is more speech, not less speech. But there are certain values that are just evil. There are certain values that are just wrong. And the values of neo-Nazis are evil. These are evil values. And you can say them, but I'm going to call you out on it. And so the cultural relativism you see on campus, I find really disheartening, especially because the only reason that we even get to have these conversations on campus in the first place is, as you put it, because of the legacy of thoughts from dead white Western men.
How many more of these do you want to take? We have quite a line.
Well, I mean, we can go for another few.
Hey, Ben. George, Jr. here.
Okay.
So just 2 quick questions. You stated that there's 3 things that you need to do so that you don't or you can grow out of poverty in the United States, and that's
right. You won't be in permanent poverty.
Yeah.
Right.
And that is, if I can recall it correctly, get a job, finish high school, and
don't have babies out of wedlock. That's
yeah.
number 3. Yeah.
And for that third one, just from a macro perspective, how do you account for the rising rates of divorce in the United States?
Well, I mean, the rising rates of divorce in the United States are largely a result of the decreasing level of religiosity in the United States is one reason. So a lot of people get married religiously and then stay married religiously, and if you don't find a religious tie that binds, then people move on. Part of it is a divorce culture that had sprung up in the 1960s that suggested that children were just fine if the parents decided to separate. Part of it is the separation in general of sex from marriage. And it used to be that sex within marriage was the norm, now it's the exception. And so if you can do sex outside of marriage, then what exactly do you need marriage for if you're a guy? right? And the reason I say that is because the sex drives of men and women are not the same. And anybody tells you that, anybody tells you differently is biologically ignorant. And so, you know, there are a number of reasons why divorce rates have increased, but it's had a devastating impact on mainly women. I mean, marriage is one of the best deals that women ever got. I mean, it's a fantastic deal for women. It really is. Because it turns out that men are capable of siring children with any multiplicity of women and then abandoning the woman with children. Marriage locked men in. It was great for women. This is why women who are married mothers are significantly better off than women who are single mothers. It turns out it's really difficult to raise a kid alone. And God, I'm sorry ladies, but it turns out God gave you the wombs. So, you know, when it came time for men to leave, they would take off and you were still stuck with the baby. Right? So that's just, again, the reality of the world. So, number of reasons why the divorce rate rose, but it's been a disaster for the United States for sure.
Hi, Ben. So, well, to give a bit of background, I'm actually not even American, so I'm from Honduras in Central America. And in general, I would consider myself pretty socially liberal, economic left. But again, I'm here mostly because I pretty much agree with several things that you said, especially like you need to know the other person's viewpoint so that you can reach an agreement. For example, you can try to reach a consensus.
Or disagree, at least clarity.
Yeah, or disagree. Yes. So, in doing that, and I also agree with the fact that there's really nothing like objectivity. So, like every medium, for example, is going to have their own bias, their own point of view.
Right.
And I think what we need to make sure is that you have just a diversity of viewpoints, so that at least someone like who wants to be informed, they can just have like they can have every viewpoint. So. In general, I like to read I'm still reading mostly liberal publications, like Vox and The Economist. And I wanted to know, and again, that more sort of the policy wonk kind of publications. And I wanted to know, like, what would you recommend, like, sort of a conservative policy wonk kind of magazine or publication?
Oh, okay. I mean, well, there's the City Journal from Manhattan Institute is very good in terms of policy on the right. Commentary Magazine writes about policy a lot. There are a number of publications. National Review obviously writes a lot about policy. My website, The Daily Wire, writes a lot about policy. So there are a lot of sources. But I mean, I agree. I think that having a wide variety of sources that you read across the political aisle, it was very useful. I read, you know, all of the main sources of the left. I think it's important, and I think that it's informative.
All right, okay. So Woodrow Wilson was pretty well regarded for being a progressive, and that's why he's a famous president. Despite that, he's also quite a bit of a racist, and that's why a lot of people in Princeton want to take his name off of buildings. So I think we all know how we feel about the reason why people want to take Wilson's name off. However, if he was famous for being progressive, and that runs counter to his racism. Do you think his name should remain on the building? Part of the reason for taking it off?
Yes, I think his name should remain on the building, not because I think Woodrow Wilson was a good guy. I think Woodrow Wilson was a scumbag. Because he was a progressive and also because he was a racist. And by the way, those two are not mutually exclusive. Virtually all of the progressives of the time were also racist because they believed in Darwinian evolutionary racism. I mean, they believed in a social Darwinist view of race that was really quite gross. But the reason that I think his name should remain on the building is because I'm not in favor of obliterating history. This is how we learn who is good and who is bad. Right? If I take my kid by the Woodrow Wilson building, and my kid asks who is Woodrow Wilson, that's a good opportunity, as the left might put it, a teachable moment. Right? It's an opportunity for me to say who was Woodrow Wilson. And one of the things that I think is silly is wiping out history because some of us find it off-putting. Turns out most of history is off-putting to most people. Right? It's why whenever people say, what era would you prefer to live in? The answer is probably for 99% of people right now. Right? Because the past was not a great place. So I'm not in favor of wiping out history to spare people's sensitivities. If you don't like Woodrow Wilson, good on you. I'm with you. Now let's talk about how much you suck together.
Hello. In the long run, say 15 to 30 years, it appears that significant portions of our population will no longer have a livelihood-sustaining function in our economy because they're objectively worse at tasks than computers. Since you clearly believe in a smaller, limited government, do you believe that we should improve access to the pill, condoms, and non-abstinence-based health education to ensure that unwanted children do not result from vaginal sex. Specifically, that which is intended purely for the sake of pleasure, not reproduction? If so, what policies would you advocate for, or if I hope I'm this wrong?
This is very specific. Okay, so yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you for composing your thoughts. So my view of sex education is that that's something that ought to be done by the parents, not government. That's my view of it. And abstinence education doesn't work, and neither does non-abstinence education. Like, they are both virtually useless. If you look at the statistics, the reality is that the pregnancy rates and the STD rates, whether you're in an abstinence-only situation or a non-abstinence-only situation in the educational level, across the country, when you average it all out, it's almost the same. It's pretty much the same. My feeling is, obviously I'm not pro-abortion for the sake of the economy, because I don't think that you get to murder all the old people just because they're an economic draw either. Murder is not justified by economic necessity. I'm not that much of a John Stuart Mill utilitarian. But beyond that, the idea of, the answer to your question would be, if you take away government subsidies for people not being productive in the economy, they will be forced to be productive in the economy. I mean, this is why I think capitalism is a moral system and socialism is deeply immoral. Socialism is the proposition that I'm breathing and you owe me crap. And capitalism is the proposition that unless I give you something voluntarily and you take it from me voluntarily, I won't eat tonight. Right? That's the proposition of capitalism. So, I don't think that we're at risk of starvation because of overpopulation. I think we're at risk of stupid kids, and the answer is better local education, better parenting, and better behavior.
I guess my only concern with that is based off of, I obviously we've agreed that people who have two parents have better outcomes, right, and are less likely to engage in the situation because they might have that principled background that you and I are both fortunate to have and other people might not have. So the thing that concerns me about the answer that you should leave it up to the parents is the premise already is that there isn't that parent figure there with that, or if they don't have that education because they don't get it.
Right, so I can't, and the government is not capable of being anybody's parent. They're just not capable of it. We've tried it for 40 years, and that's why you've seen the rate of single motherhood in the white community skyrocket from 5% to 40%, and the rate of single motherhood in the black community skyrocket from 20 to 70 since 1960. That's what happens when you tell the government they get to be daddy. Right? The government is not capable of being daddy. Your school teachers are not capable of teaching your kids about morality. You need to be a better parent. And presenting people with the falsehood that there's going to be someone who comes in and fills that gap is just not true. And by the way, taxing me more to pay for a teacher to pay for that, here's my view. If you want me to pay for your kid, I'll adopt your kid. Okay? If you want me to pay for your kid, then I get to bring up the kid the way that I want. Right? You don't get to have your cake and eat it too. You don't get to take my money and then bring up your kid badly. You don't get both. So that's my general view.